Okay, we're live. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the third episode of the Microbiome Labs webinar series. Today, we have Dr. Tom Bain with us. So he is the president at Microbiome Labs, and he's actually a chiropractic physician. So he has had 20 years of clinical practice, and he has his own practice in Glenview, Illinois, called Pure Balance Natural Family Healthcare. So he and his wife Ingrid have a practice where they focus mostly on chronic digestive problems and autoimmune disease. And today he's going to talk to us about all the different products that we have available. So welcome, Dr. Tom.
Thank you, Acacia. It's great to be here. I know we typically do this event in a live format, and I apologize for the last minute changes to that. My travel schedule has gotten a little out of hand, and this was the best way for us to get it done. So Acacia and I are going to go back and forth and talk to each other through this and get all the information out there. But recognize that if you do have any questions, once we are done, just send those in like you always do, and we'll make sure that the questions get answered right away. So there's no concerns that you're not going to get your questions answered. I like to think we're going to address many of your questions in the format we have it set up in. But don't worry if we don't. We're very accessible and ready to answer any questions you have. So as you know or may not know, we are Microbiome Labs. Our flagship product is MegaSporeBiotic. What we're going to be talking about today are some of the other products that we have. In the probiotic category specifically, we have a product called Restore Flora, another HU58 product. So we have two other products. And then we're going to hit specifically on the two vitamin K2 products, what's special about them and why we offer it in the format we do, and why we're offering two different versions of essentially the same thing. So we'll get started with the probiotic side. So 5 years ago, we started this company, and the idea was we saw some challenges in the marketplace. The probiotic space seemed to have a lot of unanswered questions. There were questions whether these lactobacillus and bifidobacteria products could survive. There were questions that if they did survive and did get to the intestines, could they perform probiotic functions once they were there? And as we've shown over the last 5 years through different types of research studies, that those products really don't survive through the gastrointestinal tract. They don't. When they do get to the intestinal tract, they are dead bacterial or dead cell therapies with limited benefits. And so it's been that story that we've been able to build our Megaspore business around. And then since then, we've gotten into some of the research studies. We've recently published our leaky gut study. And so, but what we want to do right now is, rather than getting into the science of all that, we just kind of want to back up a little bit and go on the whole idea here. Why did we go with spores? What's the deal with spores? And so, you know, as many of you may or may not know, we aren't the first people with this concept. This wasn't an original idea of ours that we were going to get these bacteria and we were going to be the first ones to bring them to market. We saw products in the marketplace that were using bacillus spores, and we saw that many of these products, like the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria products, were very unstable. One of the major spore-based products, a bacillus coagulans product, every time we test it in the lab, it's at most 30% spore form. So if our product is not in spore form, if it's 0% spore form, then zero of that bacteria is going to survive through the stomach acid and be able to perform probiotic benefits. The secret sauce is, how do we keep it in spore form? That is the key, and that's what differentiates us from other spore-based products that are in the marketplace. Now, there's not a lot of spore-based products that are in the marketplace, but if you are seeing Bacillus coagulans or Bacillus subtilis, those are the two ones that you'll most frequently see in the marketplace, and they aren't from Microbiome Labs, then you can rest assured that it is an unstable product, and whether it's 30, 60, 70% spore form, it's not 100% spore form. We've been able to show that over and over in many different third-party lab testing, that those other products they're just not stable enough to maintain that spore and keeping the product so that it's able to survive through the stomach acid. So the process of keeping the spore in spore form, it's an interesting story. The bug goes into if you will, an inanimate state or its spore state in response to danger or in response to an environment that's inhospitable to it. So the process that we put the bacteria through in order to shock them back into spore form is a proprietary process that took our scientists almost 7 years to figure out how to do. And so that process, that's really what separates Microbiome Labs from other companies. The other companies figured out, hey, we can make this bacteria, and then they just started selling a product. We figured out, okay, we can make this bacteria, but it's very unstable. And then we spent the time and the research to figure out how to keep it stable. So that's the main difference between all of our probiotic products and other spore-based probiotics. You're going to see more and more of them in the marketplace. At every conference we're getting to, we're hearing more and more of our competitors seem to be dipping their toes into the water of spores, which is fine. It's going to spread the story of spores, but we will always continue to be the industry leader because of our technology in keeping them in spore form. So another question that we do get a lot, and it was an assumption that many physicians made, especially early when we launched the product, is that, this is just a soil-based product. This is a soil-based organism product. So Jordan Rubin, Garden of Life, were the ones that kind of kicked off the whole idea of soil-based organisms, kind of made that term an everyday term in holistic medicine, if you will. And very grateful to Jordan Rubin for the work he did. He definitely laid the groundwork for a lot of what we're doing in our research now. And so I don't in any way say anything disparaging about Jordan or Garden of Life as a company. But what they did was they used a few spores. The main one in the original formula was the subtilis, and they mixed it with a bunch of other bacteria that are found in the soil. And the challenge with that is that there isn't a lot of research on the soil bacteria and their benefits in humans. Many of them have no research. Some of them have some research questioning whether they may be pathogenic to humans. Personally, I do not believe they're pathogenic to humans in any way, shape, or form. That has not been my clinical experience at all. In the beginning, the Garden of Life product especially had the spore in it. It had the subtilis in it, but they weren't able to keep it in spore form. And so it started to smell like something that you really didn't want to put in your mouth. So as far as them working through their process, they've actually now removed all the spores from their soil-based organism product. Some of the other products out there that call themselves soil organisms have kind of copied the path that Garden of Life took, and they're using bacteria that are found abundantly in the soil. But what you have to recognize about bacteria is that they're named after where they're active. So a soil-based organism is active in the soil. Spores, bacillus spores, are gut commensal organisms. They're active in the gut. And so when they're in the dirt, when they're in the soil, they're in a state of suspended animation. They're waiting to get into the gut of the next insect, mammal, human, whatever they come across. But until then, they're not doing much in the soil. They're not decomposing the soil. They're not doing anything that's really healthy for the soil. They're just waiting. They're using the soil as a vector to move to the GI tract of the next available insect, microorganism, bacteria, mammal, whatever it might be. So once they get into the digestive tract, then they become active and then they start to perform their probiotic functions. So bacillus spores are frequently put in soil-based organism products, and therefore they're incorrectly categorized as soil-based organisms when they actually aren't. And so those are some very common questions that we get. And so I want to just knock those off right off the bat. And then what I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of just break up the other probiotic products, kind of explain what they are, and explain what the conditions we might use them in. So Restore Flora was the second probiotic product that we made. We made it because a lot of certain practitioners, particularly dentists, and hospitals and nursing homes seem to be focused on Saccharomyces boulardii, that they wanted a probiotic that had Saccharomyces boulardii in it. And their story was around antibiotic-induced diarrhea, traveler's diarrhea, and it was the treating of symptoms in those settings using boulardii. And so what we decided was we would use two of the spores that are very aggressive against infection, the subtilis and the clausi. We'd mix them with a dairy-free version of Bacillus Saccharomyces boulardii. And the three of them, we would call that Restore Flora, and that would be our second probiotic product. So what were we looking for? Well, like I said, there were dentists and certain practitioners working in nursing homes and things like that that just couldn't conceptually think of a probiotic without thinking about boulardii. So if we didn't have boulardii, we couldn't even talk to these people. So, and boulardii is a transient environmental organism, very similar to spores. It's one of the few probiotics that we've tested that shows the ability to survive through the gastrointestinal tract. It's a transient organism where the spores stay for, maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks. Boulardii stays for about 48 to 72 hours. So it's moving through quickly. But nonetheless, it is and has demonstrated very good benefits at treating symptoms, especially symptoms associated with antibiotic-induced diarrhea and traveler's diarrhea. And so we launched that product, and clinically, so in my practice, so I got the first bottles of MegaSpore. When they first came out, I got the first 50 bottles, and I started testing them on my most difficult patients. I gave it to my Crohn's, colitis, irritable bowel patients, and I started testing it. Those first 50 bottles were gone, and it went really well. Everybody did really well with it. So they got another couple hundred bottles sent to me, and I started giving it to more and more patients. So to date, I have well over 1,000 patients on the product. I spend at least 2 days a week talking to doctors from around the world who are using the product and having challenges with different patients, and I kind of coach them through that. So I've seen and I've heard everything. There's no one with more experience with the product than me. I don't say that to be egotistical. I'm just saying it to tell you that's how it is. I've been here longer. I've been using the product longer. I've seen what it can do, and I've also seen where there can be perceived challenges and how to work through those challenges. MegaSpore will more than likely, for the vast majority of you, it will still continue to be 95% of the time the probiotic that you will use. So these other probiotics that we're looking at, we're going to talk about them today. We're going to spend some time. They're a great adjunct to have. They're a great tool to have in your toolbox. But it's really not going to change the fact that the bulk of what you're going to be selling as a probiotic is still going to be MegaSpore. MegaSpore offers the full spectrum of benefits. What we're looking at with these other products, especially on the probiotic side, what we're looking for is very specific changes, very specific types of circumstances that we want to address. So with the Restore Flora, shortly after we made the Restore Flora, we realized that we had an opportunity to help really sick patients that have liver failure. Okay, how did we figure that out? In the gut model study, it said that we reduced ammonia pretty significantly. And so we did some work with that, and we recognized that that was actually HU58 that was doing that. It was the Bacillus subtilis that was doing a very good job of reducing the ammonia levels. So what we did was we made a high potency HU58 to use for a clinical trial that we did at a gastrointestinal office in Youngstown, Ohio. So we had to make a bunch of this product for this research trial. We had no idea what we were getting into. So we did the research trial. That data is available. Here's the nuts and bolts of it. So we took people that were in varying stages of liver failure. So early stages of liver failure are very easily controlled by rifaximin, the antibiotic that stays in your GI tract, and lactulose, a horrible drug that gives you diarrhea for days, sometimes weeks, depending on how bad the ammonia in your system is. But nonetheless, it manages things. The liver failure is a progressive condition. As it progresses, the ammonia levels start to creep up again, and even the lactulose and the rifaximin don't work. In those patients where the drugs were no longer working, we showed the ability to reduce ammonia by almost 30%. So a very statistically relevant reduction in ammonia in very sick patients. So a couple findings that came from this. One, that was the first probiotic study ever done with patients on rifaximin, showing the ability of a probiotic to work in an antibiotic environment. So that was a first with that study. But what we were theorizing at that time was that, the HU58 was really fighting the methanogen bacteria that was digesting the undigested protein and producing ammonia. And then we also felt that the subtilis was actually just eating the ammonia. And so it was clearing ammonia from the system pretty quickly. So we had all that information, and that research is ongoing, and we're continuing to work with, we're in conversations right now with Mercy Hospital in Ohio, looking at using 3 or 4 of the branches of the Mercy hospitals to scale up this study with liver failure patients and continue to work in that manner. Now, as practitioners, though, not a lot of us see liver failure patients. So here I am now. I've got many of my patients on MegaSpore. I've got all this Restore Flora on one side of the room, and I've got all this HU58 on the other side of the room. So I started experimenting with patients that were in different states. I was finding that in patients with SIBO that I was still needing antimicrobials, that MegaSpore by itself was doing a good job, but in hard to treat SIBO cases, we just weren't getting over a hump and getting the results we were looking for. So I started using the Restore Flora in conjunction with the MegaSpore in SIBO patients. There's some good data with Boulardi and SIBO. I thought an increased amount of the spores, the clausi and the subtilis that are very strong at fighting infection. I thought that would be a good idea. Same thing with the HU58. It seemed like it was a really strong immune stimulator, and it seemed like it was competitively excluding infections. So I started using it again, different SIBO patients, patients that were, for whatever reason, were unresponsive to just the MegaSpore. With HU58, I started using it in addition to MegaSpore with a lot of my autoimmune patients, patients with chronic rheumatoid arthritis, chronic psoriasis, things like that. I started using it as an adjunctive, additional immune modulating benefit. So this is where, and I have no reason to not be honest here. This was pure experimentation. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to do any, I knew I wasn't going to do any damage to anybody, but I wasn't sure I wasn't going to cause people to have a lot of intestinal cramping and, to make them uncomfortable. I wasn't exactly certain of that. So I went through titration dosing with many of these people, and I still continue to titrate people on the product from beginning. If I'm starting somebody on MegaSpore, I like the titration just because I don't like that hectic phone call that says I've got painful diarrhea, and they don't have to have those symptoms in order to get improvement with any of the products. So if I've got them on a full dose of MegaSpore and I want to add one of the other probiotics, I still do a titration dosing to the full dose. But just like with MegaSpore, the vast majority of people will do fine with it. And so what conditions have I looked at then with these products? In my practice, I use laboratory analysis. I use EAV testing, electroacupuncture according to Vol. I use muscle testing. I use a lot of different ways to get feedback from the individual about what's the best thing for them. So I'm very confident in my skill set to be able to differentiate with the tools I have who needs what, how much, and when. So for those of you that have those tools, I would ask you then to just plug these products in and use them as you're getting feedback from the individual patients. For those of you who don't use all those different forms of feedback and you pretty much go more on your gut feeling and more on patient response, I use all three of the products at the same time: MegaSpore, Restore Flora, HU58, and as a C. diff protocol. I've had really good results with that. That's the one time that I justify the use of all three of the products. And I've been doing that with some patients. As of right now, I'm going on 9 continuous months of doing that in someone who's had unrelenting C. diff, a failed fecal transplant, and I'm 9 months now. At the 3-month mark, we were really making improvements. At this point, I feel like we're in a really good place with this one patient, but neither of us is ready to take her off the products because each time we've tried to go down on something, her symptoms have increased a little bit. So we're just going to do this for a solid 12 months, reevaluate, do some stool testing and see what comes up and see. We may wean down, we may not. I'm not sure where we're going with this yet. The C. diff thing is a very interesting process for us. In theory, a spore should kill a spore. C. diff is a spore. It's a bad spore. It's a spore that has toxins that are part of it, so that it can release those toxins into your system. And when it's in a bad environment, it can sporulate and hide. And so that's why a lot of doctors will be like, "Oh, your C. diff looks a lot better." No, you just pounded them with antibiotics. At one point, the C. diff said, hey, there's too many antibiotics in here. It's sporulated, and it's waiting for the antibiotics to clear so it can come back out. And so the incidence of recurrence of C. diff are ridiculous. And that's where practitioners like myself are seeing patients. We don't see them the first time they get C. diff. That's because they've just had a hip replaced, they've done a bunch of antibiotics, and now they've got C. diff, and they're already in the hospital. And so we're not seeing them then. We're seeing them when it's failed 2 or 3 times. We're seeing them as they're on their 3rd round of antibiotics. First 2 didn't help. And so at this time, and I leave the door open to change this story at any time based on my experiences, but as of today, the protocol that I recommend is 2 capsules of MegaSpore with breakfast, 2 capsules of Restore Flora with lunch, 2 capsules of HU58 with dinner. So all of the spores function better in the presence of food. That's why we tell people to take it before, during, or after the meal. We want there to be food in the small intestine when the spores come out. So when it comes to difficult cases, autoimmune diseases, SIBO, things that, the challenging cases that come into some of our clinics, that's where I would start looking at either using the HU58 or the Restore Flora, possibly instead of MegaSpore. For me, I almost exclusively do it in addition to. So my Hashimoto's patients, my rheumatoid arthritis patients, my psoriasis patients, where I feel like I need some extra immune boosting properties, I may just do HU58. I might just say, we're going to do this for 4 weeks in tandem with the MegaSpore, and then we're going to go back to just the MegaSpore. See what happens. So those are things. It's called practice for a reason, people. We're learning as much as, the patients are getting better, but we're learning how to take them through this process. So this is a very young process. We plan on studying this in C. diff models so that we can more definitively give you black and white understandings of what's happening. But as of right now, I've had very good results with at least 25 C. diff patients. So it's to the point where I'm comfortable recommending it. I'm comfortable that we're not doing any harm in any way, shape, or form. And, maybe it's a coincidence that when we added this protocol, that the person that had 4 failed rounds of antibiotics and 1 failed fecal transplant, maybe it's just a coincidence that when we got involved that they were going to get better anyway. I can't sit here and say that is absolutely not possible. But I'll go with the side of I don't really believe in coincidence, and these changes happened right after we added the protocol. The patients are feeling great. Their symptoms have abated. Some of them I've weaned off the protocol and they're fine. But I have some difficult ones that quite frankly, I've been scared to wean them off. They were just in such a miserable state when we got to them and they're doing so well right now. The little bits of changes that I've tried, and I'm seeing some pushback by their body, so I'm just going forward with this. So, like I said, I'm still learning, but right now I'm very comfortable saying if you've got a patient with recurrent C. diff, a protocol of 6 capsules a day, 2 each of the 3 products is a great start. With your autoimmune patients, with your SIBO patients, adding one or adding it in addition to MegaSpore or adding it separately, depending on the feedback you're getting from the patient. I think that's all things that I've experimented with. I've seen some benefits. At the end of the day, you want to control inflammation. You want to control the immune reactions coming from food. That's what we've proven that MegaSpore does. So when we're talking about research, squelching the LPS that's released after a meal and controlling the inflammation and the autoimmune reactions that occur with that, that's what MegaSpore does. HU58 and Restore Flora are add-ons in specific cases, and they are, for at this point in time, they are the C. diff protocol. So, what didn't I cover, Keisha?
That was everything. Can you touch a little bit more on the antibiotic protocol? Because you mentioned with the HU58
Yes.
that was still effective during rifaximin. So can you speak to what you recommend when your patients are currently on antibiotics and then what they should do afterwards?
So I still use MegaSpore. So MegaSpore is 2 billion HU58. So it's the highest concentration of the bacteria that are in MegaSpore is HU58. And so that is the pharmaceutical dose of Bacillus subtilis as of right now. For the liver failure study, we used 10 billion HU58. That was just based on some of the early feedback we were getting from certain patients, that they were tolerating it at the higher numbers, and that maybe for these severely ill people, maybe we needed to give it in those higher numbers in order to be able to make some changes in a short period of time. So on antibiotic therapy, I will just use the MegaSpore. If I've got them on MegaSpore before they go on antibiotics, that's an ideal situation. If they are going on antibiotics, then I will just make sure that they start on the MegaSpore at the same time. But that's usually not what shows up at the office. What usually shows up at the office is, I took antibiotics, now I've got diarrhea. Now I'm miserable, I don't know what to do. Now in those patients, with a lot of them, I'll do the MegaSpore once a day, but then I'll add in the HU58 high dose at another time of the day. I'll add the extra piece of the HU58 to counteract the problems that have onset, whether it be, anything from cramping or just not feeling well after the antibiotics to actual diarrhea and any other symptoms that we're relating to the course of antibiotics. So in the antibiotic therapy patient, by and large, it depends where you meet them on their journey. But if it's somebody, if it's like, Mrs. Jones just is taking a Z-Pack for a sore throat. She's never taken a MegaSpore, but she hasn't started the Z-Pack yet. Take it and just give her the MegaSpore. Adding some of the other products, whether it be the Restore Flora or the HU58, in my experience, that's been a short-term thing that I've done when people have come in and they're already in bad shape from taking antibiotics.
Gotcha. And so if you were to add HU58 to MegaSpore after they've already been on antibiotics, would you add one or would you work them up to two?
I'd work them up to two. Okay. And I'd work them up to two. And the rule of thumb that I've lived by, and I don't know who put this rule of thumb in my head, but somebody did. So if it was a 2-week course of antibiotics that caused this problem, then I have to give the heavier dose for at least 3 times that. So if it's been 2 weeks, I'm giving 6 weeks of the HU58, and I'm keeping them on the MegaSpore at the same time. So for 6 weeks, they're on both. And then at the end of 6 weeks, I'll take them off the HU58, leave them on the MegaSpore. But I will, as I start them on the HU58, I will start with 1 capsule first, because the full 10 billion dose is 2 capsules. So I will start them on one first, see how they do with that, and then go up to the second dose with that. They almost all, I rarely see people that have problems with the high dose HU58. It doesn't seem to cause the intestinal cramping. It doesn't seem to cause the diarrhea.
Yeah, especially once you've weaned them on to the full dose
Right.
of MegaSpore.
Exactly.
And so is it important, does it matter what time they take the MegaSpore or the HE58 in relation to the antibiotic? Do they need to take it like 2 hours away, or can they take it at the same time?
It doesn't matter. The spores are resistant to the antibiotic.
Okay.
You know, some people just have a hard time with that in their mind. And many of us who have been working in this field for a long time, we've kind of stuck to certain stories. And, you know, one of the stories with lactobifido is, well, you can't take it while you're on an antibiotic. Well, that's not the case with the bacillus spores. The other thing is, you know, well, if you're going to take it, at least make sure that you take it at a different time of the day. It really doesn't matter. You're not going to make a difference one way or the other. But if your patient or if you as a practitioner have a problem with somebody swallowing their antibiotic while they're taking their probiotic, you can recommend it at a different time. That's fine. But you should know you're not getting any added benefits over, you know, what you thought you were getting, what you were hoping you were getting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that answers most of the questions for the probiotics. Do you want to talk about the K2 products now?
So the K2 product, so like I said earlier, I come from a applied kinesiology background. That was how I was trained early in my career. So muscle testing has always been part of my repertoire, if you will. And muscle testing is not for everybody. And muscle testing definitely is a tool that is only as effective as the practitioner who's applying it. So I recognize the shortcomings of muscle testing. But that said, I've got some great friends in that use that tool that I've gone to conferences with for years who are very successful. And I've always trusted their word. So when we launched MegaQuinone, so MegaQuinone is a high potency vitamin K2. So 320 micrograms of the K2. And we mixed it with a number of minerals that we saw were very helpful in helping your body absorb the vitamin K2 or take up the vitamin K2. And those were magnesium, zinc, boron, vitamin K1. And so we put them all together, boom, we're off and running. And so I start telling all the doctors that I know, hey guys, we got a new K2 product, you know, check it out. So all the guys that are muscle testing say, can you send me a test kit? I want to muscle test it. Sure. I start getting phone calls. Hey, the K2's not working. K2's not testing. It's testing on some people, it's not testing on other people. So this is where the thought started in my head that something's not right with MegaQuinone. And now let's fast forward to where we are now because we figured it all out. So it's not that something's wrong with MegaQuinone. It's that there's 30 milligrams of zinc in it. And if your patient happens to be taking 30 milligrams of zinc in their multivitamin, now they're taking 60 milligrams of zinc. No human being needs 60 milligrams of zinc a day. So the muscle testing people were picking this up in the early stages. And so what happened was we were getting people saying, my patient can't take this product. They were never saying it because it was of the high potency K2. It was always because of the cofactors that we added to the product. So then we thought, okay, well, maybe we should just make a standalone vitamin K2. So the K2 study was done with 300 micrograms of K2 mixed with calcium pyruvate. It was done because we're playing off that mitochondrial resuscitation story. So calcium pyruvate is not a very good version of calcium. It's a good deliverer of pyruvate, which is good for the Krebs cycle, which is good for increasing mitochondrial function. So we have two forms of the vitamin K2, each at the 300 microgram and above, 320 and 300. One's mixed with cofactors to help with absorption. The other one's mixed with pyruvate, so there are no issues with that. In patients that are taking a lot of magnesium or a lot of zinc, and the megaquinone doesn't fit into their routine, you can give them Myomax. The Myomax will fit in. It's not going to overdo any of the other minerals, and they're still going to get the benefit of the high potency vitamin K2. If they're not taking any of the cofactors, then megaquinone is your go-to product. It's got the high potency K2, and it's got all the cofactors that help take it up. So it's got K1, because if there's not enough K1 for your liver will steal K2 from your periphery and make it into K1 for the liver. So we want there to be enough K1 in the liver so that it doesn't steal any of the K2 from your peripheral circulation. If there's a lot of boron in somebody's bone formula and you don't want to overdo the boron, or if they've got estrogen-dependent cancers and you don't like the estrogen-stimulating benefits that boron shows, then you need Myomax. And so there's a time and a place for everything. And so in my practice, I more frequently use megaquinone. But like I said earlier, on the probiotic side, where maybe 96, 97% of the time I'm using Megaspore, with the megaquinone, it's probably more like 70%, so maybe 65%. So it's still the majority of the time, not as much as Megaspore as the majority of the time. And there's very specific reasons why I would be doing it. Those reasons, the use of Coumadin or warfarin, okay, those blood thinners are, well, they're rat poison. If you can get your patients off them, that would be the best thing you could do for them. But if they insist on staying on it, if their doctor insists that they have to stay on that and not move to like the Xareltos of the world and some of those anticoagulant medications, then they should stick to Myomax, and you should have their INR levels measured regularly, because with K2, the need for the warfarin or the Coumadin should go down over time. You have to be careful and you have to monitor their levels while they're on the product, but it's safe. And as long as you're monitoring their levels, everything will be fine. The misconception is that you can't give vitamin K to patients that are on warfarin and Coumadin. That is true. Vitamin K1, you can't do that. That's why you shouldn't give them megaquinone. But you can give them K2, and as long as you're monitoring their INR levels, you'll be able to see that their need for warfarin or Coumadin goes down, and as long as their medication is being tapered down appropriately, it won't have any issues. So those patients shouldn't do it, and those patients where they're getting their minerals from other places, and the extra zinc, the extra boron, the extra magnesium is too much for them, then we go to Myomax. I like Myomax. Myomax is what we're looking at for athletes and things like that, but a lot of those athletes are zinc deficient, magnesium deficient, K1 deficient, boron deficient. So like there'll be some of the doctors who said, well, I use Myomax for my athletes and I use megaquinone, with my, menopausal females and everybody else. It's like, yeah, you're pigeonholing that a little bit. I wouldn't make it that black and white. There's plenty of cyclists and marathoners and ultra marathoners that are depleted in zinc and depleted in magnesium. And when they take the Myomax, their body's not going to absorb as much of it because they're missing some of those cofactors. So that's the two differences between the two products. I want to make a little bit of a differentiation between the K2 market itself. The K2 market is a poo-poo platter. It is so bad. If other parts of the nutrition industry were as bad as that, companies would be shut down overnight. There are very few things that are tested for post-production. Very few things that are not tested for these days. So things like vitamin C, you've got to test it before and you've got to test it after, and you better show label claim. You better show, if you said 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, there's 1,000 milligrams in your finished product. probiotics and vitamin K2 are the two things that there is no post-production testing for. It's very expensive. It's very hard to do. We are doing that on the probiotic side anyway. We just feel like a change is necessary. And so the verification, the DNA verification that we do post-production testing is really the only way to test for whether the finished product meets label claim in the probiotic side. It's expensive, but we do it anyway. We're hoping others will join in and change with us. On the K2 side, there is so much crap coming from other parts of the world that is being sold here and nowhere else as a food supplement. Vitamin K27 is a drug in many other parts of the world. In those parts of the world, only Menaquin Gold is the version of vitamin K2 that's sold in those other countries. And so because it's the only one that's stable enough. And when we test these other versions of vitamin K2, they're very unstable. Many of the products coming from the Norwegian area, the products coming from Italy, products coming from China, they're just so unstable that by the time your patient gets them, one, there's some questions about the purity of the products. Two, the products just can't stay stable. And by the time your patient takes the product, there's none of the product in. We have taken products from the professional market and we have tested them 3 weeks post-production. And they've had 90% less of the product than they put in it 3 weeks earlier. And so they're saying we put it in, but 3 weeks later, we can't find it, or we can only find 30% of it. And so it's a very unstable molecule. One company in the world has done the stability testing that it takes to see that the product can stay stable through shelf life. It can stay stable when you mix it with other ingredients. And that's the Menaquin Gold brand. So if your K2 is not Menaquin Gold, then it doesn't meet label claim. And we've probably tested it for you. So if you call us and ask us about the K2 that you're selling, we'll be happy to talk to you about it. It's not us that does the testing. It's not us going, and these guys are bad because it's not us. This is third-party lab analysis. Gold standard for how you measure vitamin K2 levels, all on the up and up. It's just a very unstable molecule. And so if your brand is Menaquin Gold, fantastic, you're good. But you're probably at somewhere between 45 and 100 micrograms. And in order to get the mitochondrial benefits that you're looking for, we want to see that in the 300 micrograms and up level. And so Microbiome Labs sells the Menaquin Gold version of vitamin K27, and we sell it at the 320 or 300 microgram dosing. So it's convenient and it's going to be more cost effective than a lot of the competitors that are selling the same brand. But if you're using one of the other brands, you're not delivering what you think you're delivering. That we've proven over and over. And actually, we're sending a new batch of products from the marketplace to be analyzed again, because enough of you have said, well, what about this? I really love this product and this company's great. And yeah, the company may be great, but they're not sourcing their raw materials in the most intelligent way if they're not using the Menaquin Gold brand of vitamin K27. Now, there's another brand or a couple other brands where they're using K24. Okay, K24, K27. Let's talk about the difference there real quick. So K24 is how vitamin K2 appears in our environment. It appears in organ meats. It appears in natto as K24. That's great. K27 comes from bacterial fermentation of a protein source. The Menaquin Gold is the only one that is chickpeas. All the others are soybeans. Now, some of those brands will even say we're soy-free. Well, we recognize that there are no soy proteins in their finished product, but you technically cannot say you're soy-free if you came from soybeans. And so that's another place where they're doing some, let's just say, not above board marketing practices in how they're selling their products. So the Menaquin Gold comes from chickpeas. It's fermented from chickpeas. It's stable. Where was I going with this, Acacia? I think I lost my train of thought.
Probably the half-life of NK.
Thank you very much. So the half-life of K24 is about 4 to 7 hours, depending on the literature that you read. The half-life of K27 is 48 to 72 hours, depending on the research that you read. And so if you're supplementing K24, you're supplementing it in a food form, natto, organ meats, ground up organ meats. You pretty much have to eat those foods throughout the entire day in order to maintain a steady level of the K2 in your body. Okay? There's not a lot of people eating organ meats. And if you haven't eaten natto, you probably are never going to eat natto, because when they deliver it to your plate, when they deliver it to your table and you smell it, you're going to say, I'm not eating this. It smells like really dirty, sweaty socks.
It kind of tastes like it too.
Yeah, it kind of tastes like it too. So the likelihood that you're going to be able to get your patients to consume foods high in K2 is very low. And you'd have to have them doing it all day long in order to maintain healthy levels. K24 that is in supplements is synthetic. Hasn't been analyzed, hasn't been tested. I doubt it's bad for you. I just think it doesn't do much. And it, too, has a very short half-life. There are some people that believe it can be bad for you. There are some people that believe in the process of making the synthetic K24 that we get other metabolites, other synthetic metabolites, that they may be harmful on some level. I don't know that conversation is for smarter people than me. I just try to stay away from synthetic wherever I can. I would like to say do the food version, but the food version in this case isn't realistic. You're not going to get people to eat kidneys all day long. You're not going to get people to eat natto all day long. You can get them to take a pill or 2 pills in the morning with their breakfast and then not have to do that again until the next day at breakfast again. And you're still within your time frame because it's got a 48 to 72 hour half-life as it is. So K24 to K27 is your best bet from a standpoint of supplementing your patients. If you've got someone who loves natto and will eat it every day, I would recommend that over MegaQuinone. You're going to get a much higher concentration. I believe the last I saw, a serving of natto was 500 micrograms of K2, K27. So I mean, that's a great dose. It's food form. I mean, kind of a no-brainer if you can get them to do it. And if you can get them to do it every 48 to 72 hours, or in the case of the natto, you got to have them doing it twice a day. You know, so can you get somebody to eat natto twice a day? If you can, great. Do that. That's a better way of doing it. I think you'll find that the MegaQuinone is cheaper, dose for dose though, and more palatable. So I'm all about food-based stuff. That's how my practice is. It's how I live. I'm also, reality has to come into play at some point. I am not going to eat natto all day long. I am not going to eat organ meats all day long. And so in the event that you can get patients to do that, you should do that. It's the preferred way to deliver your K2. For those that you cannot, the Menaquin Gold version of vitamin K2 is the only version you should be supplementing. And you should be supplementing at a dose of 300 micrograms or above. So you're getting all the bone benefits, all the cardiovascular benefits, and all the nerve and mitochondrial benefits.
Awesome. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. Really quick, do you want to talk about who needs to be taking K2, whether it be MegaQuinone or Myomax?
In my opinion, everyone over the age of 30 should be taking vitamin K27. The process of cardiovascular disease and the process of bone loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis, it starts in your 30s. It's not something that pops up when you're 60. And so, when you're 65 years old and you're told you need a double bypass because you're all plaqued up, that didn't start 2 weeks earlier. And so the process, both processes, cardiovascular disease, the calcification of your arterioles and your arteries, and the process of bone loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis, these things in women are happening in conjunction with each other. Their bodies are dumping their calcium reserves to balance out an acidic state. That acidic state alkalizes out with the mobilization of the calcium reserves. Calcium's got nowhere to go at that point, so it just settles down in the arteries and the arterioles, and it starts the calcification process. Now, women have a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease than men do. I believe that there's enough data that points to menstruation and ovulation being two very acidic periods in a woman's monthly cycle. So in addition to eating an acidic diet or over-exercising and increasing the lactic acid to make your body acidic, in addition to all those things that men do too, women have two chunks of time in their monthly cycle where their body gets very acidic. So their body dumps their calcium reserves. That's a good thing. Brain's happy, blood's happy, everybody's happy. But if there's no K2 in the system when that process is over, then the calcium doesn't have anything to drive it back to the bones. Now we're starting the cardiovascular disease process, and we're starting the bone loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis process. So to me, there's not a woman on the planet over the age of 30 that shouldn't be on it. With men, I used to say, maybe they could wait till they get into their 40s or something like that. But now understanding the benefits at the mitochondrial level, there's no human being over the age of 30 that doesn't need preemptive support daily to improve mitochondrial function. There's no one over the age of 30 that doesn't need a proactive program against cardiovascular disease and bone loss. So, call me crazy, but I think it's basically everybody over the age of 30 needs to be on a high potency vitamin K27 product.
Yeah. And then real quick, last question before we let you go. Is it safe for children or would you recommend it for children?
So, sometimes I had a little boy who came into my office recently, last few months. Mom's 6'2", dad's 6'7". Okay. Boy is 8 and he looks just like every other little boy. He's middle of his class. That ain't going to be for long. This kid's going to be tall. There's no doubt about it. He's going to need a lot of nutrition to help him grow to somewhere between 6'3" and 6'9", which is where he's projected to end up. And he's going to do it in spurts, okay? A kid like that, I would give vitamin K27. There's not going to be enough K27 to allow that kid to go through his growth spurts. So as he's growing like a weed, I'm going to supplement that. But in a kid, 150 micrograms, maybe I may give him 1 cap a day.
Okay.
I've given it to very young children with green stick fractures that they've had. I've given it to adolescents with broken bones. Mm-hmm. So there's no issue giving it. There is no toxicity level. There's a toxicity level for K1, but not K2. K1's inside the liver, so it can be toxic. K2's outside the liver. It can't be toxic. So I'll give it, but I don't, outside of growth spurts and broken bones, I don't know that there's huge need for daily supplementation of K2 in a child or an adolescent. But during growth spurts with broken bones, for sure. But then once they hit 30, to me, supplement it. Yeah. I think there was one other thing though that I saw.
I think that was all I have on my end.
So the last question is vitamin D and the relationship of vitamin K2. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I remember that. Well, I didn't remember it. Thank you for putting it on the sheet of paper so I could remember it. So vitamin D is being supplemented in huge amounts by everyone. I'm not disputing dosing vitamin D at high levels. I personally supplement vitamin D based on the serum value. I will give very, very high amounts if I'm getting single digits, teens, whatever it may be. I will give very, very high amounts for short periods of times to people in their 20s and 30s, so forth. So there's a lot of different ways that people have been taught to supplement vitamin D3. I'm not here to step on any of those toes, okay? You've got your way of supplementing vitamin D, that's fine. If you're asking me, one, vitamin K27 has to be supplemented with vitamin D. If you look at vitamin D toxicity, it's exactly the same as vitamin K2 deficiency. And so they are intimately related. If you give too much of one and not enough of the other, you will deplete the other one. And so if you're giving vitamin D, which you should be, we're going into winter, even in the warm climates, you should be supplementing your patients with vitamin D. You need to be supplementing with vitamin K2. So that everybody wants to know, well, if I'm giving this much vitamin D, how much vitamin K2 I have? Don't look at it that way. You give your vitamin D based on whatever mathematical equation you have for that. You're giving 300 micrograms a day of vitamin K2 because you want all the benefits. Okay, so there's not I'm giving 4,000 IUs, so I only need 150 micrograms. No, it doesn't work that way. You're looking at it. We want K2 and D3 in the system at the same time. They're fat-soluble nutrients. We want them taken with meals. They are related in that if you take one and not the other, there's going to be a problem. But they are not attached at the hip to the point where you have to say, for every IU of vitamin D3 I give, I have to give so much of the K2. And anything you heard about that is not rooted in science. It may be based on somebody's clinical experience. That's all fine and good. But anyone that gives you an equation of, for so many IUs of D3, you have to give this many micrograms of K2. That's not based on any science. And so the science of vitamin K2 shows that at the higher limit of 300 mics, you're getting mitochondrial benefits, nerve benefits, bone benefits, cardiovascular benefits. Okay, so when you're giving K2, you want to get all the benefits of vitamin K2. You're giving D3, you want to get all the benefits of the D3. Personally, I use serum D3 to monitor what I need to be giving with the vitamin D, and I use 300 plus mics of vitamin K27, period.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you got to get running.
Yes.
If you guys have any questions, you can reach out to your account managers in your areas. We can get more questions, and we can also send out a Q&A after this in about 10 days to 2 weeks with all the questions and answers so that you guys can see it written down. So if you guys have any extra questions that we didn't get to, we'll definitely address those for you.
Perfect.
But thanks, Dr. Tom, for being with us. And
all right, thanks. Thank you.